Hello everyone, welcome to video 3. We have only 5 modules this time. They're very specific and they all, probably more than any of the other modules, they all are very, very, very connected, even though all of the ones that we've been doing so far, everything is interconnected. But these are very, very specific, and you'll see what I'm talking about in a few moments. And the very first module, module 14, is really the theme for everything else. And the last one, module 18, ties everything together. Is number 18 is the light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. So you'll need paper and pencil for these modules more than usual because you'll be doing some things at the beginning of the modules, and you'll pause the video and then you'll continue going. So go ahead and have that ready. I would encourage you to take one module, of course, at a time. I would not listen to more than one in one setting. I know it is very tempting in our society, and as someone that loves checklists myself, to just go through and check them off. But you're doing consciousness work, mindfulness, both for your own personal journey and to serve others. So it's really important to let all this really truly marinate and take its time. And if the modules are doing its job, it may bring things up in you, some recognition, some opportunities for healing, wisdom that you are beginning to recognize as wisdom maybe for the first time. And again, that takes time. So I would recommend at least a week or a week and a half between each. Again, we only have 5. And again, it builds into each other, as you will see. I think the other thing to note, when I titled module 14, which is it denial or detachment? Actually, I said, is it detachment or denial? Other words that, and other ideas that I also brought into that I just didn't write a laundry list of words for the title, could be healthy detachment, could be detaching as survival, could be unhealthy attachment. So you're going to see how I'm going to hit on all of those things, and just kind of give a generalized idea for something for you to think about and be with. And it may be something you want to almost define. When you hear certain words or vocabulary that I say, you may want to define those words for yourself, or based on things that you're hearing about or curious about within modules, but also knowing that you can easily use your own life to help define those things. So again, 14 is detachment or denial, which is the theme for this entire video. 15 is detachment survival, when it's a blessing. 16 is healthy reflections versus guilt and shame. 17 is emotional bypass, honoring the gift of authentic emotions. And number 18 is on the bright side, turning pain into wisdom. So again, overall theme, the next 3 are very specific that I felt like it needed to have its own space and time to have a discussion. And then 18 is tying it all up. And unlike any other module we have done, 18 is going to give you a very short introduction of some ideas and philosophies, and it's going to ask you to take that within and really create your own homework, so to speak, your own reflections, your own master class. So module 18 is the shortest module as far as time goes, technically, as far as what I am doing. 14 is the longest, but really 18, all of these lead into 18 for you, and that will probably be the most time that you invest is module 18. You'll have opportunities of healing and understanding of yourself and others through all the other modules, but again, take your time, let it all soak in. If you have any questions, anything that pops up, this is where your healing sessions come in. This is where you can ask for another one-on-one or an additional healing session. I'm always here to do that for you, with you. Life kind of happens that way, so do not hesitate. Have your water ready or take a walk. but these modules may be one if you're taking a walk, you may need to come back and sit under a tree and stop and have your journal ready to reflect. I'm excited for this particular video because it is very, very specific, very thematic, and it's an overarching themes or an overarching theme that you will see play out over and over again through mentorship and in your own life. So take your time, enjoy the journey, and I look forward to seeing you after Module 18 and hearing and celebrating all the wisdom that you have. Much love. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Module 14. Is it detachment or denial? So for a moment before we begin, grab a sheet of paper. You're going to have the quote-unquote assignment now and a reflection at the end. But right at the very top of the page, detachment, and maybe skip halfway down, or you're welcome to just use a separate page and write denial. And as you're sitting with both of these concepts, what are the first feelings, ideas, words to describe these concepts, stories that may pop in your consciousness? And just take some time, pause the recording here in a moment, and just write it down, and we'll circle back to it at the end. So when we think about detachment, there's a lot of different ways of seeing that again. And I'll talk you through all the ways that I think about it in my own personal life, and then also how it translates into working with others. But detachment, sometimes we'll say, well, oh my gosh, they are so detached. They're not even aware of what's going on, right? Or they're just so detached from their feelings. It's really interesting when I may have a client that shares with me a very traumatic event. And sometimes they don't share it right away, as sometimes if they're very detached. And of course, when trauma happens, there is a detachment that occurs for survival. And we're going to talk about that more in person, because that's a big, beautiful, deep conversation that can bring a lot of healing and understanding. But again, when there is when someone's detached, so it becomes quite obvious. So for an example, if I had a client, let's say, that had sexual trauma as a teenager, sexual assault of some kind, and then, as I'm asking questions and, whatnot, maybe a session or 2 or 3 or 4 later, which happens a lot, when I say, remind me about, what happened with you in high school. I don't know a lot about it, or how that ever conversation occurs. And I this has happened so many times in my practice, to where someone will say, well, yeah, I did have this one thing happen. And as they're telling me about a sexual assault, they're very detached from it. There's no emotion in it. It's being spoken about matter of fact. And so that is that detachment, that disassociation, being kind of outside of yourself, and they still are. So again, there's that detachment. In that way, when it's happening, it can be very healthy to the body to protect it. But what happens is, if we stay in a detached mode, when we are safe and we're able to go back and heal, well, we just can't when we're completely detached. And it's scary and it's intense. But again, that's why we trust the timing of everything. And of course, even bigger because we do not want to push facing a trauma when someone's not ready. And the way you know they're ready is they begin to, even matter-of-factly talk about it. But I make sure my reaction, in a very grounded way, matches what the gravity of the situation. So I'm not going to be flippant about it or dismissive about it at all. I'm going to display a very calm and peaceful but very serious manner when someone is talking about something very serious. And here in these moments, if you recognize significant trauma, as a mentor, the responsibility is reach out to me, and we can talk about that client in general. Of course, nothing super specific as far as names and things, but the generalized information, and that most likely you may need to send them to a trauma therapist. So again, we'll talk about more of those things when we get to the module about the difference between, when telltale signs of when you recommend a therapist that has a specialty. But again, going back to if someone is telling you about a traumatic event and they're very detached, again, my reaction, I do take it very seriously. And those are two different reasons why. One, I want, if they're bringing it up, I want them to know it is serious. But two, making sure I'm very grounded and I'm very calm and very peaceful and respectful of listening and being a reflective listener and asking questions, and also saying you do not have to answer anything that I ask. And I can't begin to tell you how important that statement is in your practice. If I ask a question and you're not comfortable or you're not ready, or, it's okay, and I will stop asking the moment you tell me. 90% of the time when I've asked that question, the person will say, yes, go ahead. 50% of probably those clients that have given me permission, there's a stopping point very clearly. You can tell their body language shifts, and I will even say, would you like for me to change the subject now? That's been a lot. It's a little heavy. Would you like to change the subject now and come back to it when you're ready? And again, about half of those clients will say yes. And of course, the 10% from the original, when I ask the question, are you okay talking about this? May I ask you questions? And if they say no, they say no. And from that point, just creating a very safe place for your client to talk about many other different things in their life. Majority of those clients, if not all of mine, eventually circle back to it when they're ready. Again, it's about feeling safe. It's about trust. There's so many levels to that. But again, that's where detachment, when the trauma happens, is healthy. It's not healthy long-term, however, and that's where PTSD trauma specialists come in handy. They're valuable resources to help your clients, and also, just help support your mentoring as well. And so detachment is just not being present, right? There is a difference between not being present and denial. Is, in my opinion, and again, I think this is a great conversation. This is really just a small aspect of a bigger conversation between individuals that we'll have as a group. But again, detachment is just not being present with that, not really kind of, again, talking about things matter-of-factly. But denial is, of course, as though nothing has ever happened. And sometimes that denial is did not happen to me, or I did not do that. Really having a hard time being in reality. So detachment feels lack of presence. Denial, again, in my opinion, from what we're talking about in this concept and this idea, is is really a lack of being in reality. So again, detachment, lack of presence, or not ready to be present. Denial is, I think, even further down the line, and it is not in reality at all. If you have someone that is significantly not in reality, that is, you've got to get support for that client, or recommend someone else that specializes in that. There's lots of different psychological diagnoses that could align with that type of denial. Generally speaking, I haven't found tremendous amount of people in denial. I think a lot of people say, I'm in denial about that. If you're saying you're in denial about that, you're just detached. You don't want to be present with it. True denial is you're not in reality. You're not perceiving things accurately or even seeing your own actions accurately. So in mentoring, detachment is very common, and that will probably be the most significant thing you deal with if someone has had some level of trauma or grief, sadness, and of course fears. So, okay, take a little pause, and then of course I would be remiss not to bring up healthy detachment. So there is healthy detachment that has nothing to do with denial. And there's several telltale signs of this. But a healthy detachment is when we go into witness mode. All of my teachers, when I would be talking about something that was bringing me down, I would like kind of spiral, talking about an event or talking about some type of fear, and I would cry and I begin to spiral. Both of my mentors would always say, Laura, go into witness mode, witness it like you're the narrator of the story that you're telling. But emotions and the fear bring me down into attachment in a very unhealthy way. So again, over attachment is over identification with a fear of some kind. Healthy detachment is being in a witness mode. It's a very mindful thing of witnessing a fear, but not being in the fear, not being pulled down to the emotions of a fear. And that is a very specific practice that I recommend everyone go on the journey for, because it's life-changing for an individual to be able to witness yourself, to be able to go into that mode of recognizing what is happening without, again, becoming that. And all practitioners are that for their client. And it is a significant practice. You will hear many different stories. Many of some, may touch your heart very deeply. Some of which you may be able to relate to. But practicing that witness mode is huge. So an example of witnessing or a healthy detachment is, if any one of you are parents or have worked with children, great training ground there. But a healthy detachment is recognizing that your child or the children you're with have their own journey that is not always interconnected, or your fault one way or the other. But a healthy detachment is recognizing, okay, when I parented this way, this may be how they interpreted this, without me saying I'm a bad mother or I'm a bad person. There's a recognition that when I did this happened, or this was their reaction. And so I'm in witness mode of this. And so when I'm in witness mode, I can go back from a healthy place and recognize, okay, so I created someone upset when my child's upset. And it's a reaction clearly to something I said or did. And so again, asking to healthily detach is witnessing, okay, did I project some fear onto my child? Is this a natural cause and effect that is healthy? Is this really representing insecurity in my child? And I was in a very grounded, healthy place, giving healthy feedback. So when I'm getting into that healthy detach mode, I can really, really, really get curious about myself, about the interaction, about the other person. And then I can make decisions from that place. A detached mode is, again, I'm not here and I'm not present. This is really not for me. And detached, again, can almost feel like I don't really care. And of course, a deeper piece of that, if it goes into not really being reality, would be denial. So again, denial, not in reality at all. Detachment, not being present. Healthy detachment is extreme presence in a very grounded way of witnessing and being willing to learn and grow. It's another way of saying growth mindset. And again, there is attached, which is attaching ourselves to an outcome. It can be unhealthy because then we're attached to the result, and and that's always coming from fear. When we are attached to the result, and we can think about very understandable ideas and experiences and feelings when we are attached to an outcome and why we want that outcome, of course. So there's no judgment ever. But when we're overly attached, we're overly identifying to something or to someone, and it creates a tension and a pressure that, again, can be very unhealthy. So there's healthy detachment, and there's completely being detached. There's completely being in denial. And then there's, unhealthy attachment. So big concepts. If you go back and you look at your piece of paper of different things you've written down, the reflection for this module is just to look at how you defined it. Think about the different concepts that were discussed here. See if you want to add anything to it. And of course, I just put, is it detachment or denial? Because those two words are used so often. Denial is used so often. And I actually think most people are not, in my definition of mindfulness, truly in denial. I think most people are detached due to trauma, due to survival. I think a lot of us experience unhealthy attachment. And the goal through healing is healthy detachment. So you may want to add some of these words into your notes, thoughts, concepts, ideas, questions, but bring this to your either one-on-one session the next time you have one, or your group session, and let's talk about it. Thanks, everybody. Hi, everyone. This is Module 15, Detachment Survival When It Is a Blessing. And I definitely talked about this in Module 15 about healthy detachment, unhealthy attachment, the difference between detachment and denial. But I knew in my heart that this needed its own module. It will not be a long module, but to give this its own space as a sense of permission, to give grace and understanding. And of course, as always, deep compassion, unconditional love, and non-judgment to this idea. And of course, there's going to be different degrees of detachment survival. When you're working with young people, and this is true for all, of course, but specifically I'm thinking about young people here, teenagers, young adults, and even some younger children. The detachment piece, when there has been some type of trauma and akin to the extreme sexual trauma, abusive, any kind of abuse, to the extent of also when you were a young child and maybe bullied on the playground, or someone called you a certain name or commented on your body. There's lots of different traumas, and sometimes what our body and our wise consciousness when we're a child will detach from a situation to truly survive it. A lot of times, if I'm working with someone that has recognized this detachment of some kind, shame always seems to come in play. Very similar. It could be like, I can't believe I let that person define who I was, or how I walked in the world for a period of time, to I really knew better than to continue dating this person or being this person's friend. And what happened during that time is we weren't ready. It is a form of denial, sort of, when we don't want to be full in reality, but we detach from the emotions that bring us so much pain that we're not ready to face. And again, going through some type of trauma, that disassociation, that detachment occurs when we are, again, just trying to survive a situation. And again, those things have different degrees. So in that detachment survival, when someone recognizes that that detachment, either again, being mad at themselves, usually it has something to do with being mad at yourself. The very first thing I offer when someone really literally comes out of being detached in an unhealthy way and begins to go into witness mode, there's a threshold in between. The threshold, again, between detachment survival, or just now not in survival mode anymore, but detaching from that situation, kind of pushing away because we're not ready, moving into healthy witnessing, healthy detachment, healthy unattachment. There is that threshold of grief and facing some shame or guilt. And the very first thing when someone's going through that threshold between the two of healthy detachment and unhealthy detachment is giving that little child, that young person, a hug, offering gratitude for saying what you did, what we did, what your younger self did, what my younger self did, was the best I could do in that moment. And when I detached or disassociated or created a wall around me to survive, I survived. We survived because I wasn't ready. I wouldn't, by the way, and always reiterate, if you were ready to face what was happening to you, you would have. Your body and your mind protected you because you were not ready, and you detached to survive. So we go back when they're in the threshold in between. And again, you've got to begin to see someone go from that detachment to survival to getting more present with the situation and moving into the presence of the reality of what happened. And they begin to grieve, again, shame and guilt. But you've got to begin to see those emotions, because that means they're getting present. But remember, when they're getting present initially, they're becoming present in that time where that trauma happened. So they feel like a child again. So their presence starts back when they're 7 or 10 or 13 or 20. Their mentality goes back to that presence first. And then the way we move through the threshold to get to a really healthy attachment, healthy detachment, to begin to witness, is usually telling them again, you did what you had to do in that moment. So be grateful for that detachment survival. Be grateful for that wall. Thank your inner child for doing what it had to do to protect you, to get you where you are now. And now where you are, you must be ready, because you're beginning to talk about it. You're beginning to allow yourself to feel the feelings that you've been pushing away, detaching from for so long. That is so critical. Finding gratitude for the child that got you where you are now. The child did its job, the teenager or whatever. It could happen even when you're older, but that part of you did its job to get you here now. Instead of shame and guilt, because we're always doing the best we can in the moment that we're given. We always are. And if fear takes us over, then that's what happened, and that's okay, because that's what we are here to heal. But we weren't ready then. We didn't know how. And a lot of times these things are things that happen to us that we weren't prepared for. How could we be? So again, being grateful for that detachment survival, blessing it. And that helps an individual move through that threshold between detachment survival, where it's now becoming a burden, where there's lots of guilt and shame, again, because there's a lot of guilt and shame about it, because that trauma is stuck in the child's mindset. Even we may be 40 years old, 50 years old, 30 years old, but our emotions were not allowed to mature because trauma stunted it, and we detached. We detached to survive, but it did stunt that particular aspect of our emotional growth. So when we become more present, we go present back again to that moment, and the child's emotions start coming out. And all of those feelings are there. And again, the way we go through the emotional maturity from the time that stunted to where we are now, there's grieving throughout that whole thing. But the way to move that through, I hesitate to say quicker, but I actually think it is quicker sometimes. Frankly, healthier would be the word I would choose the most here, is to be grateful. And to say thank you to that inner child, that inner teenager, that young adult that did what it needed to do. And now recognize your own growth, your own willingness to be present. When we say yes to healing, it starts to occur. And it's not always sunshine and roses, because we're having to face our greatest pains, our greatest fears. But celebrate that you're ready now to talk about it. Celebrate that you have gotten yourself to this position, to this spot, this space and time, to where you now do not have to go into survival mode. You can now transmute and transition into thriving mode. And it is so important to recognize, I do believe with all of my heart, that we do need to face the things we don't want to face when the timing is right, in order to thrive, because we release that which does not serve us anymore. But that adult will have a child mind thinking about that event, because again, and I know I'm repeating myself multiple times for a reason, but it didn't mature from that place. So you can have someone that, in all other aspects of their life are very mature, have a great logic around a lot of concepts. But if you bring up that trauma, all logic goes out the window, and they go back into that 7-year-old, 10-year-old mindset, and how their level of maturity interpreted that. So we can see how critical it is when the timing is right, when the person is ready to go back and really begin to see this with a mentor, with a guide, from a place of health and wholeness in a witness mode. But again, going through that threshold can take a little bit of time. We are very gentle about it. We don't push it. We let our client guide the way 100% of the time. Again, we may ask questions. We may have an instinct to ask a question, but it's always prefaced with, if there's anything I'm asking, anything makes you uncomfortable, you just say it, we're done. Because being in control in that time, in that way, in that space and time, is really important for empowerment. Because the most likely the trauma is related to not being in control. And so the way to begin to heal, to open that threshold, is to give empowerment through that healthy aspect of control, out of respect. And I think you'll find most of the time, even if you're thinking about yourself, but definitely when I can't begin to tell you how many times I've seen this with clients. When I offer that I am very proud of their inner child for doing what it needed to do to get through that. And again, a lot of traumas are not just, again, some things that were done to you, an unhealthy environment. And within that unhealthy environment, that child, that teenager, that young adult could have done things based on traumas or based on not having support that they're ashamed of. And that's a trauma too, where they're maybe the perpetrator of doing something they're not proud of. And again, the key is you were a child, you did the best you could, and be grateful for what that kid did, what that teenager or young adult did. And every single time your client, typically, in my experience, will cry, because it's the beginning of seeing it through a shift from fear to love, shifting the perspective. And again, that gratitude through the threshold between detachment survival and healthy witnessing, healthy unattachment, is powerful. It's life-changing. So for this particular assignment, this is personal. I want you just to reflect on what we've talked about here. And I didn't write it in here for the reflection, but if you would like to think about how you can relate to this, is there something that you have, that you know that you went into detachment survival? And most likely you did. I'm not sure I know anyone that would not have in some form. And can you go back and have a meditation or a conversation with your inner child, or whatever age you were, and say, thank you for doing what you had to do to get me here? And begin to see things differently. Allow the stunted growth and maturity in that particular area of the mindset of how you saw it from a fixed mindset, allow it to go in growth mindset. And I'm telling you, almost without effort after that, you'll walk through that threshold and you'll be in that thriving space of witness, being in a very healthy place, healthy detachment. It's amazing. So if you need any help along this lines personally, you know I'm always here. Much love. Welcome to Module 16, Healthy Reflections versus Shame and Guilt. Again, as you will see, Module 14 was an overarching theme, and 15 and 16 go hand in hand. And again, this was another module that I have talked about specifically in the last two, but again, it needed its own space and time for purposes of deeper healing and understanding. So again, thinking about healthy reflections where we can go into that witness mode that we've been talking about a lot. And again, this is practice. This is nurturing a growth mindset. This is nurturing love. This is giving self-care to yourself. This is really the definition of self-care when it comes to mindfulness. Can we go into that witness mode that we talked about very, very specifically in module 14? Can we go in and have a healthy reflection of our own behavior, of our own past? And yes, there may be some tears, there may be some anger, and we're going to talk about in the next module in particular why we don't deny that. But again, allowing those emotions that we most likely suppressed back whenever these events happened, letting those come through, and then acknowledging those emotions, the guilt or the shame that we may have, and then saying to ourselves, I choose love. I choose wholeness. I choose wisdom, harmony, alignment. And really saying those things to yourself and asking to witness, asking to release guilt and shame. Can I nurture love within me? Can I really mean what I say? That I know that I did the best I could in that moment. Because if I was really ready, I would have done it then. But I may have been scared. So healthy reflections, getting to the place where you can look at your past, even a current situation, go into witness mode, go into a growth mindset mode, and asking, what am I here to learn? What am I here to heal and remember about myself? And I want to circle back to just a few moments ago, when we were talking about allowing those emotions to come out. And again, this will go right into the next module. But again, when we have these situations, we do go into that detachment survival mode at times. Of course, we disassociate, we separate ourselves from our mind body a little bit to get through, or really a lot to get through. But any of those emotions that we are too afraid to deal with or just push them away, that is part of that threshold we talked about in the last module. Those feelings and emotions, that guilt and shame, need to come up to the surface in order to now give ourselves, if it happened when a child, let's give a mature adult perspective on it of growth mindset. Or if it's something that happened last week, give yourself permission to love yourself through the hard stuff. But if those, again, that guilt and shame emotion, those tears, the anger, it needs to come out, because that's what you were detaching from in a way, because it was so much too painful. Allowing those things to come out and giving yourself the benefit of the doubt. Allowing a growth mindset to come in, because here's the bottom line. In order to do something that wasn't healthy for yourself or in regards to someone else, you weren't in a place of loving yourself in that moment. There's no way you could have been. So if we continue to not love ourselves and we reflect in a way that's like, I'm not good enough, or I should know better, like we're just doing the same thing over and over again. And that's how we got there to begin with: lack of love, lack of understanding. And so if we can offer and really mean it, and again, if you're telling your mentees you were doing the best you could the moment you had, we've got to live that for ourselves too. And again, there's a place to healthily reflect. Like when I'm saying healthy reflections too, when we get to that place of witnessing, if we did something that was, again, not healthy for ourselves or towards someone else, when we go, we need to go and quote unquote correct that. I apologize, and this is why. When you have an apology from a place of witness and true understanding and not from guilt and shame, you will not project guilt and shame on someone else. You will offer an authentic apology because you will feel that you get it, that you've grown from this, that you're grateful for this experience in order to let you grow and expand your consciousness. When we reflect from a place of guilt and shame, that carries through to an apology if we owe one, because we're putting all our eggs in the other person's basket. Do you forgive me? Because how you see me, that's where all my power is. And now I'm making it about me again from a place of guilt or shame, from a place of I need to feel like I am enough. But when you know that you are enough and you can witness these things as cause and effect feedback, like we talked about on a test, if you have a 65 on a test or whatever, it's just a number and it just says you understood 65% of the material, which really in the big scheme of things, 65% of material when maybe you didn't know anything about it before you had this, is pretty darn good. But it's just a number. So again, our kids and we are not trained to look at that number and see it from a place of curiosity. No, immediately feel shame, guilt, stupid. Some kids will be like, oh, I don't care anyway. Anytime a kid tells you they don't care, that's not true. They actually do care. When they don't care, they don't say it. They just live it. So they do care. And so, but when we can look at that from a place of growth, from a healthy reflection of that 65, then I'm like, okay, I'm going to get curious about this. What did I do? What do I understand? What do I still not understand? And then we're going to dive into that from a place of motivation and excitement and the craving and the loving of learning. But when there's guilt and shame, which again started a long time ago, especially in schools, then we just keep that cycle up and up and up and over and over and over. And then all our values, external, internal, it's just all connected. So getting to that place of healthy reflection is worth it. Allowing those emotions of guilt and shame coming up if they need to, but training yourself, nurturing yourself that this is fear. And let me tell you, because I am definitely have had those feelings, guilt and shame. When I'm having those feelings, it's really hard for me in that moment at first to say this is fear. But a game changer for me is when I begin to remind myself, even if my ego didn't want me to, I just asked for clarity. I asked for a miracle. I asked for help. I asked for, and for me on a spiritual level, I would ask for divine guidance about all of that. And immediately I could start to say, well, even though I feel guilt and shame and it feels very real and I feel like a horrible person or whatever it is, I know this is fear, and fear is an illusion that for some reason my ego is giving a lot of power to be really, really real. And I know love is the only thing real. So I'm asking to see love in me in this situation. And boom, the moment you say that, you start to, even just for a few seconds, you go into witness mode. It is the idea, the concept between the inhale and the exhale of the breath. That space in between. If you can get to that space in between and expand it, if you can expand a place of love just ever so slightly, begin to see love, it is a game changer. And then you can go into healthy reflections. And that is how we mature. That's how we grow. That's where wisdom comes from. That's where healing and remembering comes from. It is worth it. So how can you relate? Spend some time on this one. Reflect. Of course, I say this one. Spend time on all of them. There's a reason for all of it. But again, take time to reflect. How can you relate to this? Is there something right now that you can offer yourself a healthy reflection and give yourself the avenue to get there? Allow those suppressed feelings to come out. And again, we don't really successfully suppress them because they're always in the back of our mind. And even if we're not thinking we're feeling guilt or shame, it will come out in the grocery store line, or it'll come out with our children or our partner or at work, because they're always actually there. The mind and the body does not self-select. So, but to become conscious is to be willing to allow those feelings to breathe and bring them out and face that guilt and shame, and then tell yourself, I need to help me see the love here. I want to see the love here. I know this is fear. Again, remember going back to a super long time ago at the beginning module, love or fear. Guilt and shame is fear. End of story. And if you entertain that too much, you'll get pulled back into it. Just know it is what it is. It's not love. So being willing to see love in the situation will help you breathe a little deeper, and it'll begin to grow and grow and grow like that little spark in the dark from a lean caddy. If you focus on the spark and you watch it, it gets bigger and bigger, and it takes over the dark, and you can't believe you missed it the whole time. So then allowing those suppressed feelings when that event happened to come out, face them. Ask for love. Ask for witness mode. And then you can get into a place of healing and then healthy reflection. You get wisdom. You know what to do if you need to apologize to someone else. It will come from a place of love and not needing their approval and not needing their forgiveness, because you've already forgiven yourself. And the best way you can forgive yourself, of course, is to live in your authentic truth of love. And you will grow, and you will grow, and you will grow in your wisdom. Much love. Welcome to Module 17, Emotional Bypass, honoring the gift of authentic emotions. So, in your journal, the top of the page, would you write emotional bypass and just begin defining that from your own words, your own experience. And again, just pause here in a moment and write what emotional bypass means to you. The first time I ever heard emotional bypass was from a non-denominational minister who had a tragedy happen in his life where he was with his husband coming back from a conference. It was actually the same conference I was attending. This was a few years later, but he was leaving that conference a few years previous, and his husband had a medical emergency. I believe on an airplane, and he passed away. And it was a humbling and beautiful experience to witness him sharing about his journey through that. And the whole point of his lecture was about emotional bypass and how, as people that help people heal, it's so important to honor the emotions and not bypass the experience. And so what I have found in my practice is most likely, I haven't found it otherwise, so I'm going to go ahead and say most likely, but I always leave some room for something different. But most likely, healing does not occur until there's acknowledgement of what happened to you, or acknowledgement of a hard time, and seeing someone that is usually the validation. And again, I know that it's external validation. At first, yes, it is. We'll be moving that internally to heal. But it's you as a mentor sometimes represent a surrogate mother, a surrogate father, a surrogate friend, a surrogate partner that they may have wanted validation, acknowledging of this hurt, and they did not receive it. So we are there to acknowledge, to validate, that hurts. I see you. You matter. How you feel matters. And I think that's critical. What also can happen is there's emotional bypass where, again, think about emotional bypass is the deeper part, of course, is denial, not being reality, but it's a detachment of some way that's not healthy if we want to bypass something, right? And again, we go into survival mode and we do bypass those emotions for a moment in different times. When we are in an expanded place of consciousness and we are becoming present within our body, it doesn't mean we're not going to have quote unquote negative or hard emotions. So when we get in a place of awareness, we can begin to catch ourselves going into a unhealthy detachment of emotional bypass, acting like these things do not exist. And a lot of people that are spiritual or mental health providers, they understandably so may not want to admit, sometimes I teach these things, I help people, but I'm having a moment here and I don't want to admit that I'm struggling. I don't want to admit that I am not living at this moment what I've been teaching. So giving yourself permission, and that's kind of what this whole mentor group is all about. It's about supporting our authentic selves and knowing it is a gift in there. If anytime I've gone through a hard time or having a hard moment with something, again, I've now trained myself so much because I know it's true that there's a gift in this somewhere. There is something that, for whatever reason, maybe it's a childhood wound, to where my ego is bringing that wall up and that wall's creating pain, and I'm having a hard time seeing the reality of love because I'm trapped behind this wall of fear. But I know there's a gift in it. And I know there must be some block, something I'm having that's popping up in this time in my life because I'm ready. And I'm making now the decision not to emotional bypass. This slide is very, very personal to the mentor. You eventually will have, and you may have clients right away that are more conscious and more self-aware and have a high emotional IQ that's been nurtured to where they're recognizing, I think I'm emotionally bypassing something, I need your help. But this is also for you in giving yourself permission. The second aspect of this is you can have being aware of emotional bypass and giving yourself permission to feel what you're really feeling. Knowing that you can go through that threshold when you felt it, it's been acknowledged and validated. Again, you being a mentor, acknowledging and validating someone else. That helps go through that threshold, asking to see the love and the gift in it, and it'll move you to the other place of witness. But witnessing is not emotional bypass. Sometimes we get confused with those two things, or I know at one point I probably would have as well, or would have. Emotional bypassing and witnessing. Witnessing is you have gone through that journey of validation, understanding. You're feeling, you have felt those emotions. The witnessing is almost the gift we give ourselves, the gift that comes at the end of the storm. Is the rainbow. We have looked our greatest fears in the eyes, and we have come out on the other side in love and wholeness. So that's a comparison of the two. But again, back to that second aspect of emotional bypass that is important. And then there's kind of a spot when the validation and acknowledgement has happened. But sometimes people will have already had that, or you have done that, and then they get stuck in that cycle. They get stuck in the wanting that validation that their pain and who they are and what they are matters. And so that's where, as a practitioner, as a mentor, there's our mindfulness piece of they feel stuck. There's one thing, a process that takes a while. And the reason, how you know the difference between they're processing still through things or they're stuck is usually they'll tell you, I feel stuck, or I feel lost. Stuck is usually the word I hear. And the other thing is, they're still working through the process when there's different aspects that they're working through. It's not usually quite the same one, or there's a little bit more the next time with one aspect. But you can begin to see, and again, it may be slow, but you can begin to see a little growth. Being stuck is saying the same thing over and over and over again. And I will say, do you feel stuck? And they'll be like, oh, yes. Or again, they'll volunteer it. That's when I know, okay, we're moving forward. I am now going to give you tools to nurture that love. It's going to be through gratitude. It's willing to see this differently now. It's willing to go into a growth mindset. It's willing to forgive yourself, to forgive others, and move that energy to another place. And this is going to lead us into module 18 here in a moment. But again, emotional bypass, honoring the gift of authentic emotions, is critical for yourself as you're going on your healing journey, for your mentees as they are going on theirs, if that's where they are and what they need at that moment. And it's also practicing this for yourself. Again, what you live, you'll be able to see and feel with others, not in a projection way that, you're over identifying with them in a way that is attaching. That's an unhealthy attaching. But from a witness place of recognizing, oh, I recognize this energy. I recognize this feeling, this pattern, because I have experienced it, or I have just listened and learned for so many others. But most likely, of course, you have experienced it yourself. And then you'll know the place where this is starting to feel stuck. And feel free to ask your client, do you feel stuck? And they'll let you know, because there is a difference of processing, getting stuck, bypassing, and then getting to a place of acknowledging and then witnessing and then thriving. For your reflection, has there been a time you have bypassed recently? And again, if you have a different reflection, something else that you really want to explore that this brought up for you, go for it. Go for it. Don't even worry about this one. This is a suggestion, and they all are. But has there been a time that you've caught yourself bypassing? And again, could there be because you thought you know better, or you should know better because of who you are, or I don't know, anything that would prevent you from acknowledging the emotions that would prevent, like if you've suppressed an emotion, can you offer yourself self-care and cry or be angry or reach out to a friend or to me, where you're like, I don't want to bypass this. I want to acknowledge how I'm feeling, because that's authentic. I'm authentically feeling this right now. And again, that's how we give power to ourselves. We acknowledge what is, and then we're willing to keep that energy moving to a place of healing when we offer love and we ask to see the gifts in it. So again, have your own reflection, of course, or is there a time recently that you've bypassed and that you need to offer yourself some self-care and acknowledgement and validation? And then eventually go through that threshold of just abundant love for thyself. And speaking of love, I love you. Module 18, the last module of video 3. This was a fun one. On the bright side, turning pain into wisdom. The very first time I heard that concept was an author by the name of Greg Braden. It was in his book, Lost Mode of Prayer. And I'm paraphrasing, but he said something similar to, you can turn your greatest suffering or your greatest pain into wisdom if you allow it. And ding, 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 I was like, whoa, that is true, that is real. And we can begin to reflect our own experiences, our own pain, our own suffering. We can even translate that to our own frustrations. We sometimes forget that frustrations are actually a form of pain. Annoyances are a form of pain. And so how we can turn those into wisdom. And I'm telling you, you've already done this multiple times. And we continue to grow in our consciousness and we continue to grow in wisdom. Every time I've done a module, honestly, I've had these aspects of remembering even deeper and deeper. And I feel like it's just helped me grow as well. And of course, I hope it helps you do the same. But again, I want to do this a little differently this time. And I want you to think about that concept, just purely that concept of turning pain into wisdom. How have you done that? So take a moment and write in your journal before you continue about how has any pain, suffering, frustration, annoyances in your life turned into great wisdom for you. And I will say I've done this exercise, I've formed this exercise with some teenagers in a classroom. And I learned something. And so I defined wisdom first. I know you know what wisdom means. If you do this with a young person, ask them to define what wisdom means, because sometimes when I would ask that question, turning pain to wisdom, they'll be like, well, I learned that I cannot trust so-and-so because they did X, Y, and Z. So now I'm wise to them. And so I was like, oh, got it. Okay. I understand that. But that sounds like a lot of pain still, a lot of anger, a lot of fear, a lot of annoyances. So I asked them to define wisdom for me first. And then when I listened to that, I said, I may redefine wisdom for a moment. You do not have to adopt this idea, but I defined wisdom as consciousness, awareness, understanding, compassion, but all rooted in love for thyself, and therefore how it translates into love and understanding outside of ourselves. And wisdom that grows as we grow. Again, a growth mindset. So, continuing, journaling about for a moment before we continue this module about turning pain into wisdom. You've done it. You have done it. Write about it. And then tell me about it in your one-on-ones or your group session next. So pause here and have fun. And a lot of people will ask how. How do you turn pain into wisdom? So as you're looking back on what you wrote, well, how did that happen? How did that happen? And again, I would be curious to know if some of the how is all the modules that we've talked about in this video 3. Has that not all taken step from fear to love, from fixed mindset to growth mindset, to survival, detachment survival, to healthy witness, healthy detachment? Has there not been acknowledgement and validation and allowing those suppressed emotions to come out and look at them square in the face, feel them, and then when ready, say, I am ready. I'm ready for love. I'm ready for the gift. I'm ready for gratitude. I forgive myself. I release guilt and shame as I know I did the best I could. I acknowledge the inner child or the young person or myself last week that I must have been doing the best I could in that moment, or I would have been ready to do something different. And if we shame ourselves, we're like, oh, you should have known better. You should have just gone ahead and stepped out of fear. Well, I was afraid. And I need to give myself a hug for that. That's self-care. Isn't that part of going through that threshold to that healthy witnessing, that healthy reflection? That's self-care from a place of love and gratitude for thyself, for the journey. It makes me wonder. So this module is really, that's all I'm going to say. Be with this one. Think about how you've done this. What was, if you look at it almost like an algorithm, what was the process for you in a way? I would imagine that some of those aspects came into play. But really be with this. Really be with it. Because I'm telling you, the more you reflect on this, the more you're like, wow, like I did do this. I've done this multiple times in my life. And that's going to create a sense of confidence from a place of love and authenticity that you cannot find in a book anywhere else. And I cannot talk about it anymore in a module. This is something that's already inside of you. And you have everything you need for this. So reflect, meditate. I really would love for you to spend a whole week even journaling about this. And towards the end of the week, if you want to be like, okay, is there something right now that I have pain, annoyance, fear about? I just saw all of what I've done in the past as a healthy reflection, a healthy witnessing, a healthy detachment. I just journaled about all that. So how can I move that energy consciously into my current time and space if I have something that could use not spiritual bypassing or not emotional bypassing, but could use some attention? Go for it. You are so powerful. You are so wonderful. I am so fortunate to be on this journey with you and to love you and to learn from you. Have the best time this week with this one. Take care. Until next. You made it. You're at the end of Module 18. And again, this is a journey of great depth in these modules. Not that the other ones are not. Of course they are. But they all lead really to, I would say, if we're climbing that hill in a metaphorical way, that's a beautiful journey up that hill. I feel like this is kind of that pinnacle part of understanding detachment, survival, detachment that is a blessing, healthy detachment, unhealthy attachment, bypassing those emotions where it may cross over into being stuck, and honoring the threshold between acknowledgement, the threshold beginning to heal, and really at the end, allowing pain, suffering to become your greatest wisdom, and to not live in the past, but to acknowledge the past, not being afraid of looking at it, but allowing all those things, all those little glimmers of light that were in there, even in the darkest of darks, to allow them to grow and become a gift. And again, when we get into that attitude of gratitude even for the darkest parts of our lives. It's not saying yay. It's not saying we agree that someone else's maybe behavior, if it had to do with someone else, we agree with. But it really is about transmuting and transforming how we see things. And again, I do believe when we can, even if we don't agree, when we can understand why for ourselves and why for others. And again, the why is a theme, right, of fear versus love, is pain and suffering and getting stuck there or maybe not be acknowledged there. So when we understand, have a deeper understanding, it brings out compassion. And that, I believe, is very powerful in healing, even if I don't understand why so-and-so did this. When I begin to have these ideas, begin to live out through looking at my own life, I can begin to understand how that could happen. And then through that threshold of that, authentic forgiveness happens. And it's not even a forgiveness where I say, I forgive you to the person all the time. But it's like I understand that pain causes more pain, that causes more pain, that fear causes more fear, causes more fear. And I'm going to get off that hamster wheel right now. And I'm going to forgive. I'm going to forgive you. Or I'm going to forgive myself. I'm going to recognize that you're working from an aspect of consciousness that is your truth. And many times we can get caught up in the, well, they could do better, or I could do better. Is that really true? What does that really mean? And be with that idea a little bit. Is that really true? Society will say, we'll be quick to punish and to judge. But again, this is about non-judgment and unconditional love. It's really creating that field that Rumi talked about, out beyond the ideas of right doing and wrong doing. There is a field, and I will meet you there. That is the healthy detachment and the witness mode where we can really begin to see things clearly. We're letting go of unhealthy attachments of outcomes. We're letting go of judgments about self and others. And we go into this field, and that is where all that pain and suffering turns into wisdom, because then we can see clearly. Again, not saying, yay, you hurt me and that was awful. It's not saying, not acknowledging that, right? It's not saying that is wrong for us to be upset about it. It's yes, of course. But again, when we can go back and go back within ourselves and understand how pain and suffering occurs from feeding fear, from feeding judgment, from feeding lesser than or separate, it's very powerful. So I hope you had a beautiful experience through this. Beauty meaning there may have been some things that come up that did not feel beautiful, but I'm telling you they are. I think you probably know that as well. And if you're not able to see it as beautiful, give a friend a call, give me a call. We will find the light in it, always. And then as you went through your experience, a lot of quiet internal reflections on Module 18, please bring those to your next group. If you want to bring those to your healing sessions or your one-on-ones, I think it's important. We want to celebrate you and your wisdom, because when you reflect accurately back on how that pain and suffering did turn into wisdom, even saying, I have wisdom, this is now wisdom for me, is enormous. And it helps find confidence from love, not from ego, but from the depths of I am worthy, I am love, and I have wisdom. And I'm grateful for that. And I'm here to offer a space for you to discover your own wisdom and beginning to reframe what really happened and where you can now thrive. So I love you all. I'm excited about the next conversation we have. And until then, take care. Much love.